Hey everybody, it's Brandon with Slingshot Sports, and we're here today to talk about Sentry bar parts. More importantly, we're here to talk about replacing some of the critical parts and pieces on your bar. And in this case, we're going to be going over all the steps needed to replace the main power line of your Sentry bar. You will also in this be inadvertently replacing your flagging line as well. So we're going to go over all the steps and things you need to do to make that happen. The first tools that you're going to want to get are your replacement mainline kit. It's going to have a lot of parts and pieces in it. You're only going to need a select few of them because we're going to be reusing some of the parts and pieces on our bar. The most important ones to pull out of this kit are the replacement main line itself, the flagging line replacement tube, and the two plastic retention pieces, meaning these two pieces, the retention ring and the flange, plastic flange, those pieces are all needed to perform this replacement. All these other parts and pieces that come in this kit are actually ones that you can keep for replacement just in case you need to service any parts on your bar further. In addition to the parts and pieces needed, you're gonna go ahead and need a pair of needle nose pliers. You're gonna need some glue, and in this case, we're using Gorilla Super Glue Gel. This is the recommended glue, or Loctite 406 super glue. Both these glues are gonna work really well for securing the tube back in place. Next, we're gonna need a utility knife or something sharp to do some cutting. We're gonna need a pair of scissors and a small piece of tape. This will come in handy later. I also would recommend the Allen key from the kit that came with the Sentry bar. It comes with these bungees. You wanna go ahead and remove the Allen key. You will not need the bungees, you will need the Allen key. One small Phillips screwdriver I like to use for prying. You could also use a little pokey device, and one piece of auxiliary line to help you pull a few things through the bar. So once you have all your tools, a clean workspace, you've gone ahead and removed your lines from the winders on your bar so that you have access to all the parts and pieces on the bar, let's go ahead and start with the first couple steps to get this whole system broken apart so that we can get it going again and get you back on the water as quick as possible. The first thing I'm gonna wanna do is I'm gonna need to pull my flagging line out of the tube so that I can get the tube off. And the first part of that is to go ahead and undo this eye-ring here. So I'm gonna go ahead and slide down the little plastic piece. I'm gonna open up my Lark's head knot in here. Again, some of this stuff might be tight. It depends on how much you've been using your bar. Once I create enough slack in this knot system, I'm gonna slide that loop over my eye-bar ring, allowing me to remove the ring. I'm gonna set that to the side because I'm gonna be reinstalling that at the end. Next, I'm gonna pull off the safety ring. I can again set that to the side. We're gonna be using that later. And you see now that leaves my flagging line with nothing holding it in place. So what I'm gonna do is go up to the bar end pulley side here. I'm gonna pull my whole flagging line completely out of my flagging line tube so that it's just detached. It's still connected to the line and it's still through the pulley block, but it's fully disconnected and out of the tube. That's gonna be step number one. Step number two is you need to remove one end of the tube. Now both of these ends are actually glued in place in order to keep everything secure. So it really doesn't matter what side you cut off. I personally like to cut off this bottom side. I think it's a little bit easier. So go ahead and move your safety pin out of the way. You may want to open your release and just rotate your whole chicken loop completely out of the way of the part that you're dealing with. And you're gonna go ahead and grab this plastic flange here. We're gonna pull this thing up through the whole assembly so that we have it completely exposed. This is where my utility knife's gonna come in handy. I'm just gonna open this thing up. Careful not to cut yourself. And I'm just gonna go ahead and slice completely through. That's why the kit comes with a new tube that you're gonna use to replace that part. So now that I've removed this bottom flange, I can go ahead and pull the tube completely through the chicken loop. As you can see, it'll come through. I'm gonna set my chicken loop down over here. I'm gonna pull the tube completely through my bar. And what I'm gonna have left is I'm gonna have my tube that's still connected up here to my retention ring, which keeps it in place. Now this retention ring, there's a couple different things you can do here. You can try to push down these tabs and keep this piece. Me personally, I know that I have another one of these pieces in my kit that I'm gonna go ahead and replace it with. So I'm just gonna go ahead and break these tabs off, and I think that makes it really easy to get this piece off. So I'm gonna pry it up with my little screwdriver like this. I'm gonna take my needle nose pliers, I'm gonna get a grip on that tab, and I'm literally just gonna rock it back and forth until I can completely break it off of the system. And then I'm gonna jam whatever little excess is sticking up back down. And I'm gonna come over to the same thing on this side. You can see the little tab right here that keeps it in place. I'm gonna go ahead and get my screwdriver under there. I'm gonna pry it up like that. Take my needle nose plier. I'm gonna grab it. I'm gonna break it off. Again, if you really wanna save this piece, you can push those tabs down and remove that. Essentially, now that I have those tabs removed, you can see I can easily slide my retention ring off of the tube, and I can actually remove the whole tube from the system. Now this tube, because I did cut it, is actually not workable anymore. So these parts that you just removed can be set aside to be thrown away in the garbage for later. So now that we've removed our flagging line from the system, we need to move forward and start to take apart the bar so that we can remove our power line to do the final service, which is to get all of this power line apart and replace all the internals of the bar. So our flagging line is removed. You can see all that's left attaching the chicken loop to our center lines is our main line, and we're gonna go ahead and start dismantling this so that we can get this all apart, replaced, put back together exactly how we want. So step one here, now that we've had our flagging line completely removed, is we need to detach the top part to get it all apart. So we're gonna take our handle assembly, we're gonna take our Allen key from our repair kit, we're gonna unscrew the set screw in our retention ball, slide that down, we're gonna pull our knot out of the spot, slide our handle down, and we're gonna untie the knot on the flagging line. Okay, so flagging line is undone. We're gonna slide the handle off, set that aside. We're gonna slide the retention ball off. We're gonna set that aside. We're gonna take the main depower line and we're gonna pull it through the cleat and we're gonna pull it through our center line pulley block. Now this you're just gonna wanna set somewhere that's not gonna get tangled because we are gonna put the lines back through there, and it's important that we don't introduce a lot of twists into the system. Should see all I have left now is basically all the internals that follow the mainline system up. I'm gonna go ahead and open my Velcro sleeve up to expose my block, and you notice without the plastic retention, the sleeve comes right off. Go ahead and set that to the side. And this gives us a very clear view on what we have going on here and how we're gonna go ahead and replace this piece. So we're gonna start here with this retention ball, and we're gonna open up the set screw. And this ball is here to allow us to apply some tension to the tube so that we can make the space and the parts needed to be able to undo some of the lark's head. So take the bar, push it down to the chicken loop. We wanna pull on this. You see how that moves that line and exposes more line from out from the tube? So we want to pull this down as hard as we can, pinching off the rope from the cleat, and we're going to go ahead and re-tighten the set screw onto the rope. Okay, and you can see we were able to add a bunch of rope slack into the system, and this is going to allow us to move that slack up and get this lark's head undone. So we're going to push that slack up into that area. We're going to push the slack over into the ring area. We're going to push that slack up into this area, which this might help to take your little flathead screwdriver, get in there, make sure you're getting as much slack as possible, and then we're going to pull that up, exposing the lark's head. Now that we have the lark's head exposed, you can see I just need to go ahead and undo this lark's head. Again, this is a high tension environment, so it may take a little bit of time to undo that knot. Mainline has been removed by undoing the lark's head. I'm going to set this to the side because we will be using this to reinstall. And now I'm going to go ahead and remove this line from the cleat by pulling it through the spot, pulling it out. Make sure we keep this ring. We want to set that in our pile of stainless steel rings. I'm going to push it back through the cleat again, and then finally I'm going to pull the complete cleat off of the main line. You notice here what I have left is I have my retention ball and I have my main line. So as you can imagine, the next step is going to be removing the retention ball by undoing the set screw so that it's loose, and then simply sliding the ball up off the tube. Again, you want to set this aside and keep this. And now you see I have nothing stopping my main line from pulling completely through my bar. So I can grab my chicken loop assembly here, I can remove it completely from the bar, setting the bar to the side. And now what I have is I have my main line coming out of my chicken loop assembly through my rotor head, all that stuff, and this is where we're going to pick up and start working. Now a little tip here to help avoid some mess later is to grab yourself a piece of tape. In this case, I have a tiny bit of Dacron sail repair tape, and you'll see in a second what I want to do with this. I'm going to cut a strip off about 3 inches long. I'm going to peel this up, and I'm going to go ahead and apply this tape onto the bottom here. And this is because the ball bearings are held in place here. When I remove this top rotor to get the main line off, it would allow the ball bearings to fall out and I could potentially lose them. So what I want to do is I'm just going to put some tape over that part and keep it from moving. So that way the ball bearings don't fall out and I don't need to be super on top of things when I start to take this piece apart. So little tip there is put some tape on top of your ball bearings to stop them from falling out. Next step is to go ahead and locate the 2 set screws in your rotor head. And by using the supplied Allen key, you can go ahead and take those 2 set screws completely out of the rotor head. And these are long threaded screws, so they will take a lot of rotation. So just be patient and slowly back them out. And now you'll see I'm able to pull, and my whole rotor head separates from my chicken loop. So now I don't need to do anything more with this piece. So I'm going to go ahead and set my complete chicken loop aside, and what I have left is my rotor head with rope coming out. I'm going to pull and separate these 2 parts. There is a little parting line here, and you may need to use a little screwdriver to get in there. Again, the tolerances on these parts are pretty tight. This one's not too bad. You notice the rotor head piece comes off, set that to the side, and what we're left here is the rotor head with the rope. What I want to do is I want to take this rope here that's, you can see, looped around my main line, take my screwdriver and simply pop the rope off of the head, pull the rotor head completely free of that line, and at this point I can discard my main line because this is what I'll be replacing and I do not need this part anymore. So now I've completely ripped my bar apart. I have pieces everywhere. Don't be intimidated. All we need to do is reverse all those steps we just did to put the bar back together. So we're going to start with our replacement main line. This main line comes already pre-assembled. You can see it has a large loop on one side and a small loop on the other side. You need the small loop side. Taking the small loop side and looking at the rotor head, there's 2 holes. One hole goes directly through the center of the rotor head, and one is on the side and flanges out to the side. We'll be interested in putting the main line through the flanged hole, kick out to the side, not the center line hole. So I'm going to take my main line, the small loop side of the main line, I'm going to insert it through the side hole, pushing as much of the PU tube into the hole as possible to give me a loop here. What I would recommend is grabbing a pair of needle nose pliers. Go ahead and put your needle nose pliers through there and lever against your rotor head, because you really want to get as much of the loop through the rotor head as possible in order to make this part go as smoothly as possible. So again, it may take a little bit of muscling and a little bit of play, but you see I've been able to pull my complete rotor head over the tube here. And the reason why this makes it a lot easier is because then when I have to go put the line over, I have a lot of extra here to do so. So I'm going to fold this line over, and I'm simply going to put the loop of the line around the round plastic piece of the rotor head. You can see I was able to loop it around there really, really easily. Now that it's on there, I'm going to hold it on with my thumb, and I'm going to pull my PU tube back down through that area. And again, it may take a little bit of strength and a little bit of wiggling, but you will be able to essentially seat that rotor head down as tightly as you possibly can, and the tube is protruding out just like it was before we took it apart. So if everything there looks good, I have my tolerances, everything looks great, I have a good seal with my rope around my plastic flange, I'm going to grab the bottom part of my rotor head and I'm going to go ahead and re-put these two together. Again, depending on how good you did on your tube management, getting everything to sit in the right place, you should just be able to easily slide this part directly back over your tube and enclose your whole system in this tube. Next, I'm going to pick up my chicken loop. I'm going to slide the chicken loop. Now you can see here on my chicken loop, I have some grooves on the edge. Those grooves need to line up with the two holes in my rotor head. So when I put my rotor head on top of my chicken loop, I'm going to push it down over there. I want to look through my two holes and make sure I can see that those two channels are aligned with the holes. And you should be able to optically see when everything is lined up by simply looking through the holes. Once everything looks lined up, I'm going to hold it in position and I'm going to begin to re-thread my retention screws. And it helps to do one at a time. That way you know you're getting a good lineup. I'm going to go ahead, before I fully tighten down that one, to insert the other one and just get that one threaded so that I know that the post is properly being secured by the screws, the retention pins or retention screws, whatever you want to call them, and that I'm getting proper alignment of the rotor head and the chicken loop body assembly. Okay, so now I have my main line secured to my rotor head. As you can see, I still have my tape here so that I don't do anything weird with my ball bearings. At this point, I could remove the tape, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it on there just in case. Now I'm going to take my main line, I'm going to take my chicken loop, and I'm going to feed it through one of the holes on my Sentry bar, meaning I'm going to pick up my bar, I'm going to go ahead and take it, I'm going to feed it through the hole, pulling it up tightly so that my chicken loop is against my bar, and then I have as much line exposed coming out the top as possible. First things first is my retention screw. This is really important because it's going to allow me to apply tension to this system and get this line where it needs to go. So I'm going to just simply push my line through that retention ball. It can maybe be a little tricky to get through there. That's why, again, I have my little flathead tool. Okay. So that's there, that's feeling good. Now you can see what I want to do here is I want to pre-tighten ever so slightly this screw here so that I know it's ready to go. I've pulled it down onto the tube and you can see now by pulling on this part I can expose more line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle nose pliers, I'm going to put them through my loop so that I have something firm to pull on. I'm going to pull as much rope as I physically can through the system, and you may want to come back here and just pinch down and pull again. You just want to really do your best to get as much line out as physically possible, and if you don't get a ton, that's okay. We can come back and tighten this down again, but you just want to apply that pressure and keep the system tensioned. So when you tighten this set screw here, the tube stays compressed and I have a lot of line still sticking out of the end of my tube, more so than I had before. My next step, hopefully I have enough slack. If I don't, we're going to come back and tension this up again, is to add my clam cleat. Now my clam cleat is what helps me control my trim, and there is a proper way to install it. The clam cleat itself needs to be the teeth facing down. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna take my rope, and you can see there's a little channeled side over here. I'm gonna push my rope through the first channel. I'm gonna go ahead and over the back here, slide my rope through the next hole, following the channeling on the system. Now, I need to add my retention ring that I took off before. So grabbing your stainless steel ring, slip that over the top of the rope and slide your rope through the next hole. Now you can see I'm already starting to run out of line here, right? So instead of going deep down the wormhole, I'm actually gonna pull this retention ring off. I'm gonna back up one step. I'm gonna leave my clam cleat on so I can use it to pull and lever against. So now that we've got enough room in our line by tensioning down the tension ball, we're gonna go ahead and feed this up through, getting as tight to the piece as possible, back down through. Again, tolerances are key here. We wanna go ahead and slip our stainless ring on in our center. We wanna go back through, and then our final one here is through the top, leaving enough room on this loop to be able to put our main line through this loop here. So I think we just barely have enough to be able to accomplish it. So now that we have enough loop sticking through the top, we're gonna take our depower trim line, we're gonna slip that loop over the top of our main line loop, like so. And then we're gonna take our tail end and we're gonna slide it through the main line hole, which will effectively tie a lark's head knot between these two lines. We're gonna slip the line through, we're gonna pull the lark's head tight, and we're gonna slip the lark's head down into that little grooved channel, because that's where it's gonna live ultimately. And now what we're gonna do is we're going to take the Allen key, we're gonna open up the set screw to relieve all that tube tension. We're gonna open that up, and now we're gonna just kinda give the whole system a good pull to try to get the tube to decompress as much as possible and get all these parts and pieces living in the proper orientation with the proper tensions and everything looking good. So now that everything's looking good and feels nice and loose and in place, I'm just gonna go ahead and tighten down the set screw, locking the tube in place. Okay, easy peasy. Our main line is put back on our bar, and we have our cleat back on our bar. So our next step is going to be to put our little neoprene cover back over our sleeve. So the ring is gonna go through the small tube, or through the small hole. The cleat is gonna go through the large hole. As such, we're gonna flip this over, and we're just gonna Velcro everything closed so that it's back in place. The cleat's exposed, my ring is exposed, and my main line is coming out of the top. I'm gonna reach down and grab my center lines that I set aside, and you can see they still have the flagging line installed. I'm gonna go ahead and take my main power line, depower trim line. I'm gonna slide it through the pulley block, bringing it down, and then I'm gonna slide it through the cleat, bringing it all the way through the system, nice and tight. Now I'm gonna go ahead and take my retention ball that came off of the depower strap. I'm gonna go ahead and reinstall that by sliding it over the line. And then I'm gonna take my handle, my depower handle, and I'm gonna slide that over the line as well. Again, I'm gonna tie my knot in the end of my depower trim line to secure this piece. The most important thing here is that the knot is close to the end of the rope, but not on the tail. It's actually on the rope itself. So just cinch that knot down tight. You're gonna go ahead and slide the handle back down, pulling the knot tight against all the webbing. And then you're gonna take the retention ball, you're gonna slide that down into place as well, making sure just to pull on everything and make sure everything's seated properly. I'm gonna take my Allen key, I'm gonna tighten my set screw, and my depower trim line main line is reinstalled. Now, the next step that I need to do is to go ahead and replace the flagging line tube that I cut off of my bar. So I'm going to take my flagging line tube, which as you can see has the grommet glued to one end, nothing on the other end. I'm going to go ahead and go down to the bottom of my bar. I'm going to remove the tape that I used to hold the ball bearings in place. And I'm going to go ahead and thread my flagging line tube through the bar, and it may take just a little bit to get it to push all the way through. So you can see the tube starts to come through. I'm going to grab the tube, I'm going to pull it all the way up until it's seated against the ball bearings. Now I'm going to take this tube, I'm going to put it through the bar itself. Notice I put it through a tube, not the same hole as my mainline power tube, it goes through the other tube. I'm going to set that down. I'm going to orient my bar in the way that it should be, meaning the power line is running through the top, the piece is looking on the top so that there's no twists or anything in my system. And what I need to do now is take my plastic retention device, I'm going to slide it through the ring, and then I'm going to take the retaining ring and I'm going to slide it over the two notches, locking the plastic retention piece in place. The final step that I need to do here is I'm going to go ahead and insert this end of the tube in the retention ring, and I'm going to need to glue this retention piece in place. So I'm going to open my tube of super glue, and remember guys, a little goes a long way here. On the directions for this glue it says 1 drop per 1 square inch, so you probably don't need a whole lot of glue. The other thing to keep in mind is super glue dries really fast, so have all your parts and pieces laid out in the orientation that you want them laid out in, i.e. no twists or tubes. You're going to apply a small amount of super glue to the end of the tube, covering the roughed up surface. You'll see on the end of the tube, it comes from the factory pre-sanded and roughed up. This is the gel version of super glue, so it's a little bit easier to work with, meaning it doesn't like run and slide. So I'm just going to get a fair amount of glue on my tube, which I'm feeling pretty confident with right there. And I'm going to go ahead and firmly insert the tube into the plastic flange, making sure I press the tube completely up into the plastic flange. And I'm just going to hold it in place for about 10 seconds, making sure that the glue is covering all surfaces. I now feel confident that that is glued in place. I'm not going to pull on it, but I'm going to go ahead and set that down. My final step is I need to rethread my flagging line tube back through my flagging line in order to get my system back to normal. And one of the easiest ways to do that is with a piece of extra line. So I'm going to take my extra line, I'm going to go ahead and feed it from the bottom of the flagging line tube where it comes out of the bottom of the chicken loop, and I'm just going to push this line all the way through the tube until I see it pop out the top side. And the reason why this is this line is actually easier to feed through the tube than the bungee is. Okay, so you can see now I have my line coming all the way through the top. I'm going to take my flagging line bungee, making sure that I'm not crisscrossing or doing anything weird like rolling this around my depower. I don't want that. I want it to go straight to my flagging line. So once I've found that it's going straight to my flagging line, I'm going to take my line that I just fed through, I'm going to tie it onto the loop on the bottom of the bungee line, my flagging line here, and I use just a simple overhand knot here. Doesn't need to be anything super secure. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this whole assembly all the way back down through the tube out of the bottom of the tube. Now you can see I'm going to untie my knot in my line, as I'm going to need to reinstall my safety ring. So I slide that over the tube, and my I-ring. Again, the I-ring is a little retention device. I'm going to slide it through one side of the I-ring. I'm going to make a U in my line, slide it through the other side of my I-ring so that I end up with a shape like that. And then I'm going to take the loop that I pulled through, I'm going to put it completely around the I-ring, which secures the lark's head to the center post of this little ring, not on the edges. Notice the lark's head's on the center, and I'm gonna slide my retention plastic all the way up, flush against that knot so that everything sits down nice and tight. I'm gonna make sure that everything fits here. I'm gonna come back up to the top. I'm gonna make sure everything looks good here, that there's no twists or anything weird. I'm gonna go ahead and be careful with the super glue because it's still not quite dry. So you wanna make sure that you give this at least a half an hour of drying time before you take it into the water. Put my chicken loop back together. And my bar is completely now serviced. As you can see, I've been able to replace the flagging line, I've been able to replace the main line, and everything is working as it should and brand new, ready to go to spec.